And Martin Himel, who's a security analyst, joins us here in studio. Good evening, Martin. Look, you know, this is absolutely devastating, stomach churning that this has happened, an absolute disregard for human life. You know, what does this say to you?
Well, it says that Russia's turning to its traditional tactics. We've seen it before in Aleppo in Syria, where they absolutely devastated and destroyed a city in order to win. And we've seen it in Chechnya as well. And all that it shows that when push comes to shove and the Russians need to win, they'll destroy cities as much as they have to in order to do that. But here it's a much more difficult enterprise, because the rest of the world's watching much more closely when it's Ukraine as opposed to Aleppo or Chechnya. And everything, there's like 10,000 cameras out there. It's not like one camera or two cameras or three cameras. Yeah. So all those cameras are painting a very tough picture.
Yeah, for sure. And Martin, you know, tell me, what kind of weapons do we know that Russia has in this war? You know, we're hearing some of them have an extremely high payload. Walk us through that.
I think that, yes, they do have a high payload. They had a high payload in Aleppo as well. We see from the impact on buildings that they can devastate buildings. It's also a lot of aerial bombardment. Then they have cluster bombs, which are extremely dangerous to civilians on the road. I mean, you could be like riddled by these tiny little bomblets if you happen to be outside and not even close to the impact. Then they've got cruise missiles, very powerful cruise missiles. They've used them so much that they're actually running out of some now. And all these have very powerful impact on buildings and indirectly on civilians.
And, you know, the US is now warning, Martin, that Russia may turn to, you know, chemical or, you know, biological weapons. What is the threat of this, in your opinion?
I don't think they'll go to it as easily or as quickly as they did in Aleppo. I think Ukraine is very much in the heart of Europe. It'll have a very severe backlash. It might even tip the scales of more NATO involvement, which the Russians don't want. I think they would resort to much more bombardment before they turn to that.
Yeah, and you know, Ukraine is warning of chemical danger to Chernobyl, but the IAEA says, you know, that it sees no critical impact there on safety. What's your take?
I think Chernobyl's well under control for many, many years. I think all these nuclear reactors are built to withstand the impact of direct plane crashes, which is pretty powerful like bombs. It's not that easy to disrupt them. It's not that easy to destroy them. But when you've got an active war going on, anything can go wrong. You could hit the control room and that will disrupt the operations. And the last thing you want is a nuclear reactor out of control, because that could lead to meltdowns and to very, very severe pollution all over the world.
Yeah, you know, and I want to talk also a little about these sanctions with you. You know, Russia is just now really isolated.
Yes,
what more can happen here?
On the sanction
front? To pressure Russia.
Well, the pressure is sanctions move in slow motion. They have a stockpile of goods. They have a stockpile of money. All that has to be used up to some degree before you really see the impact. So I think we'll see the impact on what's going on in Russia 2 or 3 weeks down the road, and then we'll know. But the thing that I'm concerned about, and not just me, but I'm sure policymakers throughout the world, is that if Putin is put into a corner, if the oligarchs are getting angry at him, then he might resort to very extreme measures to try to get out of that corner. And that's where the wild card when it comes to the threat of biochemical weapons or tactical nuclear weapons might come into play. Because if he threatens with those, he might want to up the stakes so much to force the world to create some sort of agreement with high-pressure tactics.
And how likely is it that we might see, you know, these oligarchs sort of turn on him? What do you think about that?
A lot of them have been assassinated for trying that or even suggesting that. And so it depends how brave they are. It depends how deep their skin is. It depends what kind of power they have, because it's a high-stakes game to turn against Putin. Putin plays for broke.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of these oligarchs, they have assets that aren't documented. They have money hidden away. How can you sanction somebody and, you know what, some of what they've got, but really hurt them when you don't know what all their money is?
Well, it hurts them in their flamboyant lifestyle. It hurts them if they want to go to a nice home in France. It hurts them if they like to use their yacht. It hurts them if they want to go on their big plane. But yes, they've got hundreds of millions of dollars stashed away in various places. And being in Russia all year around is not so much fun.
Yeah.
It takes more pain than that to get them to turn on Putin. And I think when you're hitting the oil industry and that really hurts, then some of them might say, Vladdy, you've got to change your tactics and see where it goes.
And I've got about a minute left with you. I was talking to Owen about this just before. I want to get your take, Martin. How long do you see this going for?
Oh, gosh. Well, at this stage, I think the prospects of a deadlock, prolonged, Sarajevo-style fight. If you remember in Sarajevo and Bosnia, they surrounded the city, they put pressure, and it stayed that way for years.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't say years, but I think for the coming weeks, we're going to see something like that.